Well, here it is. The video that I think a lot of people have been asking for really over the last year. If you're not aware, I have always said that I really don't like Persona 3 Reload. And I told people if this game ever came to the Nintendo Switch, I would tell that very reason as to why I don't like the game. And the game has now come out for the Nintendo Switch 2. Now, we are going to dig into why I don't like Persona 3 Reload later in the video, but we're gonna do our traditional thing that we have done for every Nintendo Switch 1 and 2 third-party game when we do these type of reviews, and that is review the actual port. Is it a good port? Is it worth your money? Is it running well? Stuff like that. We're going to dig in straight into Persona 3 Reload review of the port, and then towards the second half, you guys will get your answers for those that are curious of why I don't like Persona 3 Reload. Without further ado, let's dig right into it. So Atlus has had a history of making some phenomenal Nintendo Switch ports. In fact, I feel like the Persona 5 Royal port is one of the best Switch 1 ports out there when it comes to all these third-party games. So when Persona 3 Reload was announced for the Switch 2, I expected that the quality was going to be there for this port. However, I have to tell you that the quality of this is very disappointing, and to be completely honest, this is probably the most disappointing third-party port that I have played onto the Nintendo Switch 2, which really surprises me considering the game that it is. And you're probably asking yourself, Max, what makes this a bad port? How did Atlus mess this up? Persona 3 doesn't seem like a very demanding game. There's no way they would have messed this up. Well, somehow, some way, Atlus messed up. This is not 60 frames on the Nintendo Switch 2. In fact, it is at 30 frames per second, which I gotta be completely honest with you. I feel like that the fact that this is 30 frames per second on the Switch 2 is an absolute joke from Atlus, especially if we are considering the Steam Deck. Now, I don't want this to be a video that's talking about, hey, Switch 2 versus Steam Deck. I know that there's been a great debate of what is the better hardware. At the end of the day, I think we can all agree that both the Switch 2 and Steam Deck are very similar hardwares that serve the same purpose. So the fact that I can play Persona 3 Reload on the Steam Deck at 60 FPS, mind you, that was at launch when that game came out, and I can't do the same on the Nintendo Switch 2, there is a very big problem here. And it just goes to show as you continue playing Persona 3 Reload on your Nintendo Switch 2, how lazy Atlus did with this port. In fact, Atlus recently, over the last few days, has admitted that they rushed Persona 3 Reload to come out for the Nintendo Switch 2, which to me is just such a horrible thing to admit to, and I don't understand why Atlus did what they did. It is an absolute joke with how this game is on Nintendo Switch 2. Now, I am going to try my best to make this make sense, as I know that this sounds absolutely stupid, but this is the best way that I can explain it. As I mentioned before, this is at 30 frames per second. But as I played through the game, especially walking through these areas, particularly in the school as well, I noticed that all of the characters models, as you're running through the school, it just looks like, I know this sounds stupid, but an ugly 30 frames per second. Now, I know that this is 30 frames per second, but it just, the way, I don't know if it has something to do with the animations of these characters, but it doesn't look good. It looks ugly. I'm sure all of us have played games that's like, oh, maybe this is 60 FPS. And then we later realized it was actually 30 frames per second. There's a Switch 1 port that I would actually compare that to, and that's Skyrim. Skyrim runs absolutely amazing on the Switch 1, which it should, considering how old Skyrim is. But at one point, I really thought that game was 60 frames per second with how smooth it is. This is not a smooth 30 frames per second, and I don't know if it has anything to do with the art style, but it looks really bad on the Switch 2, especially if you are playing this in handheld. I gotta be honest, I've never had games with frame rates, even when games are dropping in frame rates, mess with my eyes or have any type of eyesore. But with how this game is on the Switch 2 with its frame rate, it was honestly giving my eyes a sore on handheld mode. I felt playing this through handheld was absolutely horrible and is completely unacceptable considering that this is a game that you're going to be playing in handheld mode forever with how long this game is. Now, since this recording, Atlus has come out and said that they are going to be doing an update to the frame rate. They never specified what this update is going to be and when it is coming out. And my only thing with that is, why did you release it like this? This is unacceptable, and honestly, I really don't like the game, but this further, I don't feel like anybody's going to have as much enjoyment with this game because of how it runs on the Switch 2. I feel like, in fact, that I am playing a Switch 1 version of Persona 3 Reload. That's how bad this truly is. And listen, I know that there's probably gonna be comments talking about the fact that Persona 5 Royal was actually 30 frames per second on the Switch 1. And that was a smooth 30 frames per second. It didn't look like an ugly 30 frames per second like Persona 3 Reload does onto the Switch 2. That didn't give me an eyesore, and I don't know what they did to the Persona 3 Reload Switch 2 port, but it is not working well. And it's just so sad to see the quality difference of Persona 5 Royal on the Switch 1 to Persona 3 onto the Switch 2. Again, I have to make this comparison. It feels like that this was maybe something that was supposed to come to the Switch 1 at one point, and then they were like, you know what? Let's just take the Switch 1 version and make it a Switch 2 version. Boom, release it. I don't know if Atlus got the development kit of the Switch 2 late, and that's why this was rushed, which their words are, this was rushed, which they should have just delayed it. It should have came out when they had the 60 frames per second, if they're even doing a 60 frames per second mode to this. Another thing with Persona 3 Reload that I'm not a big fan that they did with this release is the fact that they charged $60 for this and didn't include the DLC. Now, this game has been out for, at this point, over a year and a half. And typically when games are being ported over or have been out for a certain time period, they will release a new version, and that is going to come with all the DLC, which this isn't advertised as a new version that has all the DLC, but something that I want to highlight to you is one of the most greedy companies of all time actually released a Switch 2 version of a game that they had released almost a year ago, and that was Star Wars Outlaws. That was released onto the Switch 2 as a $60 release, but it came with all of the DLC. You would think that Persona 3, which is at close, like let's see, like 2 or 3 months from now, going to be a 2-year-old game, you would think that they would have included the DLC into this, especially since they are charging $60 for this. And I'm a little bit disappointed by Atlus with that. At the very least, I think that this should have been $40 to maybe even $50. We have games like Final Fantasy VII Remake coming out. Granted, that has been out longer, but Square is charging $40 for that when it comes to the Switch 2. And that's coming with all of the DLC. I think that Atlus should have done something similar with this. This would be more worth paying the $60 for, you know, people compare it to being a 2-year-old game almost. And to be completely honest, I don't think Atlus was going to fix this frame rate. I think over the last few days, with the fact that people were complaining so much about the frame rate, that Atlus had to step in and be like, okay, we will update it. And I think that is a joke. I can't believe Atlus did this, especially considering how well they've done their other Switch ports. In terms if I would recommend you picking this up or not, I gotta be honest, I don't think that this is a Switch 2 game you guys should buy until they fix the frame rate, especially considering the fact that it is a $60 release. It is safe to say out of every third-party game that has been released for the Switch 2, this is easily the most disappointing release and a joke of a release. Honestly, at this point, by the time that they fix the frame rate issues, it's probably going to go on sale. So at this point, with how long that you're waiting for whenever that frame rate issue gets fixed, which I don't know if people are interested in, if you guys want me to, I could come back to this game and review it again once Atlus fixes it. But until it's fixed, you should just wait to buy it when it's fixed, and at that point just wait for a sale, because it could take a month or two, and Black Friday's coming up. This could be a game that gets on Black Friday 30 bucks, I don't know. And you know, I played a lot of the demo. I was hoping that maybe the demo just sucked. You know, we've seen games where the demo is not great. They don't put any effort into it. But unfortunately, the game still runs horrible even in the full release. And that is very disappointing. All right, so that brings us to the next part of the video. The part that a lot of you are probably still here waiting to hear, and that's the fact of, why do I not like Persona 3 Reload? What is my problem with this game? The game that is, for whatever reason, very critically acclaimed across a lot of people. They think that this is some of the best Persona out there. Well, I have a lot of reasons, and I will say that we are going to be getting into the spoiler territory, but I'm going to do my absolute best to not go heavy into the spoiler territory. I'd like to first start this off by saying that out of the 3 Persona games that I have played, all of them has always gotten me hooked to the story within the first hour of playing. I actually think with Persona 4 Golden, it might have taken me 2 hours to get hooked to the story. But the point of the matter is, with Persona 3 Reload, I felt that it was the slowest start to any Persona game when it comes to the story. And I truly never got hooked to Persona 3 when I got hooked to Persona 4 or Persona 5, for example. Let's go ahead and get one of the big issues with this game out of the way, and that has to be Tartarus. Tartarus is one of the main gameplay points of Persona 3. That's where you go to progress the story, essentially. And you're going to be visiting 246 floors of Tartarus. Which I bring this up because I think it's important to highlight just how much there is to Tartarus when it comes to the floors. Because if you play through Tartarus, you are going to get very annoyed by Tartarus very fast, as it's very repetitive. There are barely any puzzles or really just gameplay physics to Tartarus when you're exploring these floors. It's basically go left, go right, go straight. Find the enemy, attack the enemy, continue fighting enemies, go up to the next floor, repeat. That is all that Tartarus is. And as you progress through the game, you will see Tartarus evolve in terms of how it's structured, but at the end of the day, it's still the same thing. Go left, go right, go straight, fight the enemy. Again, no puzzles to this game. This is the most bland gameplay that I have seen within a Persona game. I've even played a little bit of Persona 1, and I think the way that they handle Persona 1 is way better than what Tartarus is within Persona 3 Reload. Which, Coleman, when it comes to editing this, I'm very true about that. I think Persona 1's gameplay is way better than what Persona 3's Tartarus was. And you know, I've seen arguments about mementos, obviously that's what's in Persona 5, being similar to Tartarus in some ways. And I understand that point of view, but what I'm always going to say when it comes to the whole Persona 5 debate, when it comes to its gameplay, to Persona 3's gameplay, is at least with Persona 5, they have more than mementos. They have the palaces. Each palace is very different, especially when it comes to gameplay environments. On top of that, depending the palace that you are, there's a few palaces out there that actually has some puzzles that's going to actually add gameplay to this rather than just walking around. And I don't really know if I want to bring this game into this. I've always seen people complain about Death Stranding, that it's a walking simulator, that you're just delivering packages. And I've always said that I never felt that that game was that. I felt that there are real things to the gameplay of that, real intentions, and there's a motive behind stuff with that game. With Persona 3, I don't think I could say the same. I feel like that deserves more of the hate that Death Stranding got than what Death Stranding actually got with its hate. I have made a joke about Tartarus that, once again, I'm saying is a joke before someone takes it very serious, but I've been saying that Tartarus is kind of like the concept of if AI was in video games in the future. This is kind of what we're looking at, which, if you haven't seen what Tartarus is, It is a randomly generated floor every single time that you play it. You are not going to get the same floor. If you leave the game and come back, totally different floor. And I've always made the joke that, that's what AI is going to do to a lot of these video games in the future. Now, it's a joke, but you guys see why I say what I say with that, because there are a little bit of similarities there, but ultimately I'm just joking about that. Another issue that I have with this Persona game is I feel when it comes to the social links, this has to be one of the worst games when it comes to social links. I feel that every single one of these stories is very corny, and I had no attachment to a majority of these characters when it came to building confidants. Now, I will say there was one that I was very intrigued and was happy to get to the very end of, and that was the monk storyline. That was very interesting and very different from a Persona game. I was happy to see that perspective of the game, but the rest of this stuff, I did not care for, and always ended in the most corny way possible. Another thing that I did not like about this game was the main characters that you play and see throughout your whole journey of Persona 3 Reload. I feel like a lot of these characters have storylines that get built up throughout the game, and they'll touch on it, and then when they do it, they never address it again and just move on. I feel like because of how they do certain storylines here, there is still so much left to be done with said character, and they never do anything about it. The only character that I feel was done right through this whole Persona 3 Reload storyline probably has to be Junpei, because Junpei's whole storyline was built from the ground up throughout the whole entire game. They never decide to be like, hey, we're done building this storyline now that we've done the main scene. They progress Junpei the entire time. And a lot of these other characters that are part of your team do not get the same treatment that Junpei got. And that's one of my issues with this game, as it was something very noticeable to me. I don't want to dig too heavy into the spoilers, but another idea that I'm going to give to you, and I think a lot of y'all that have played the game will know what I'm talking about here, but there's a big storyline that I thought they were going to do more with, as they really had something interesting going here, but they never adapted on it after they do the one scene. There was so much more that could have been done with this character, and that character that I'm talking about is Ken. There is a whole trifecta storyline with Ken that involves two other characters that could have been further adapted upon after they do that main scene. But after that, they don't do anything with it. And it's just one of those things that it's like, wow, meet this character. It's potential, man. With the amount of story ideas that you could have done with that, it is so disappointing. And this happens with almost every single character. I feel like there's going to be some people in the comments telling me like, whoa, Max, I don't think this is true. Have you seen Aegis's story? She has like the best story ever. And I'm gonna be honest, I've never really understood why people liked Aegis so much. I understand that Aegis is a very important character to the story, but I never felt attached to this character because of how late she's introduced. I feel like with how important she truly is to the story, this is someone we should have had towards the beginning of the game. And if you're curious who Aegis is, just imagine Jenny from My Life as a teenage robot, if they decided to make Jenny a Persona character, because that's, in my opinion, what Aegis is. I also feel that Persona 3 throws so many characters at you at once at times that they don't really give you enough time to really understand this character and why they are here for the story. Really towards that second half of the game, they're throwing characters left and right. I was a little thrown off by that and felt that the pacing towards that second half was really not well done, especially as they introduced new characters. And to be honest, that's about everything I can say right now. As I mentioned, I don't want to go too heavy into the spoilers, but I would like people to know that I did put almost 100 hours into this game. And the only reason why I finished it was because my friend Sly and Jackson said that there was no way that I would put the time and effort into beating Persona 3 Reload. And by the time I finished the game, I realized that I wasted 100 hours of my time just to prove them wrong. Was it worth it? Probably not. Guys, that is my video on Persona 3 Reload. Curious how y'all feel. I know this is probably gonna be a very controversial video, but I'm glad that we could kind of clear the air of why I don't like the game. And I'm open to hearing you guys out in the comments, but let's try to be respectful, because I notice whenever people state their opinion, they often get attacked right now. And I don't know, I feel like with Persona 3, I have such a very hot take regarding why I don't like this game that I feel like comments, I'm just kind of letting a grenade come out, and the comments are the explosion, essentially. Well, guys, I need to get ready to take out the trash. So I have been talking for way too much. Make sure to backslash that subscribe button, like the video, check out the Twitter, Discord, Instagram, all that good stuff in the description below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace. All right, time to get this game out of my life.